Has cutting a circle skirt ever frustrated you? Or maybe you've been guessing what particular calculations to use for your circle flea? Do not worry. In this tutorial, I am going to be teaching you all the calculations, the easiest way in which you can cut your circle flea. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button, like, share, and comment. So we're going to be starting first with a flea. What is a flea? A flea is actually a circle, okay? A circle skirt, a skirt in a circle form. So to find the radius of a circle, we all know is the circumference divided by 6.28. So first, I'm going to be starting by drafting my circle. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll draft my circle like this. So in this circle, right, I'm going to be dividing my circle into 4 parts, right? Like so. Okay, so the very first part of this circle is going to be 90 degree. And the second part of my circle is going to be 180 degree. Then we are going to have here, I'm going to be having 270 degree and then 360 degree. All right, so 360 degree is actually a circle. So a circle is actually a 360 degree, right? That's for a full circle. Okay, so now that means that to get this 360 degree, this is 1/4 of 360 degree, this is half of 360 degree, this is 3/4 of 360 degree, and this is 360 degree. And to find 760 and 20 degree is going to be this times 2. Okay, so this circle times 2 is going to give me this. So I'm just going to start with the very first circle, which is a circle of 90 degree flare. Okay, 90 degree flare. So to find the degree of 90 degree flare, right, I'm going to be giving you guys the very simplest method so that you don't have to be calculating and calculating. All right, I know that you might not be the type that actually likes to calculate, right? So this is the reason I want to give you the very simple method to be able to achieve all of this. So to start with, I am going to be using a 90 degree flare. So for my 90 degree flare right here, I am going to be showing you what to do. Now this is 6.28. okay, so 6.28, basically I'm going to be dividing it by 4. 6.28 by 4 means this is a full circle divided by 4. So whatever I have here at this point is the very first, that's 1/4. So this is going to be 6.28 divided by 4 to give me 90 degree. So which is equal to my circumference. Now the circumference is the entire circle right here. So my circumference, or my waist measurement, is going to be 6.28 divided by 4. Okay, so that means your circumference divided by 6.28 divided by 4. So this is going to be 6.28 divided by 4 is going to give me 1.57. Okay, so at this juncture here, my circumference is going to be divided by 1.57. So for this circumference right here, I am going to be substituting it for our waist. Okay, so at this point it is going to be my waist measurement divided by 1.57. So for this tutorial, I am going to be using the waist measurement of 10 inches. So 10 here divided by 10 divided by 1.57 is going to give me 6.3. Okay, so at this juncture, I am going to be using 6.3 as my radius, right? That's the center of this circle. Now is going to be 6.3. So let's get right into cutting out our flare. So I have my pattern paper like so. Okay, I have my pattern paper, so I am going to be showing you how to cut this out. So I'm going to fold this fabric or this pattern paper into 2. Okay, and I'm going to be marking it like so. So I'll just pick my tape right here and I am going to be marking 6.3 inches. So whatever actually remains here is what I am going to be using as my length. Okay, so measuring on this point right here, I had 3.5 inches remaining. The reason I'm doing this is because my paper is limited. Okay, so I'm just going to be taking 3.5 inches round here as the length of this my flake. So I am just going to cut it out as so. Here I have my degree or circle flay of 90 degree. That's 1/4 flay. As you can see right here, there is no curve. Okay, the curves here are not as much as you want. So if I fold this flay right here, it's just going to be like an A-line flay. All right, so the next thing I am going to do is to cut out the next flay, which is the 180-degree flay. Now, to cut out the 180-degree flame is as simple as cutting the first one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, this is my 180-degree flame. Okay, so remember, this 180-degree flame is actually half of a circle, so I'm going to be dividing it by 2. All right, that's the formula I want you to note. So at this point, it's going to be circumference, my circumference, divided by 6.28 divided by 2. I don't know if you understand it. My circumference divided by 6.28 divided by 2. Okay, so now circumference, remember my circumference is my waist measurement. Okay, so 6.28 divided by 2 is going to give me what? 3.14. So 3.14 is going to be saving as what I'm going to be using to divide my 180-degree flame. So my waist measurement, we're still going to be using 10 inches. So 10 inches divided by 3.14. So 10 inches divided by 3.14 is going to give me 3.1. And this is going to save as my radius, all right? So I'm going to just go ahead to cut it out. So now I have my pattern paper spread out like so. And I am going to be folding it like so. So I'll just fold my fabric like this, okay? I fold my pattern paper like this. Now, after folding it, the next thing I am going to do is to fold it again. So I'll prefer to fold it to this side so that I'll see where it stops, all right? So I'll fold it like this. So look at it again. I folded it into 2, and then I folded it into a right angle triangle, all right? This is how it is. Okay, so now on this part that I have folded here, I am going to be marking my 3.1 inches. So this is my 3.1 inches right here. So I'll just go ahead and I will mark my 3.1 inch right here all round. And then after doing that, I am just going to go ahead and I'll trace what I had. Okay, and then whatever I have here remaining, I am going to be using this as my length. So at this point I had 7 inches, so I'm going to just go ahead and mark it all around as so. Just follow what I'm doing, and it is very, very, very simple. Okay, this is basically the simplest method to making a flay, so that you don't have issues with when you're done making the flay. You're going to be thinking of whether it's going to be the size or the waist of whoever you're making the flay with. As long as you have your waist measurement, it is very easy, okay, to make a flay of any kind. So after doing this, I'm just going to go ahead and I will cut it out. So now this is how it is going to look. Okay, this is basically how it is going to look at this point. So I'm just going to go ahead and I will label it here 180-degree flip. Okay, so the next thing I am going to do is to cut out my 270-degree flip. All right, so now how do I get this? Having found out that our circle, this is it, we have the 1/4, we have second quarter, which is actually the half, and then we have the third quarter. So at this juncture, how are we going to find our flay? okay, using the very formula I was talking about, all we need to do is to be dividing it by whatever it is, okay? So this is like my third quarter, so I'm going to be dividing it by 3, okay? For the 1/4, you divide by 4. For this half, you divide by 2. And for this, I am going to be dividing it by 3, okay? So at this juncture right now, it's going to be my circumference, right? My circumference divided by 6.28, okay? 6.28 divided by what? 3, okay? So this is going to be divided by 3. So I'm just going to calculate whatever I have. So at this point, I had 2 inches, okay? Divided by here, my answer is 2 inches, okay? So this circumference is my waist measurement, which I am going to still be using 10 inches. So 10 inches divided by 2 is going to give me 5. Sorry, divided by 2 is going to give me what? 5. So I'm going to be using 5 as my radius. So I'm going to be folding my fabric as so, or my pattern paper, whatsoever you have. I'm going to be folding it as so. I'm going to fold it again into a rectangle, triangular form, all right? So I'm going to be marking 5 inches round here like so, okay? This is basically the formula I use for me, and it works like magic, all right? So at this point, if you notice, okay, let me break it down so that you understand. The 180-degree flay and the 90-degree flay is more like, after cutting the 180-degree flay, I cut another 90-degree flay and I add it together, is what is going to give me this, okay? So I'm basically going to just stress this out. So instead of doing that, this is the easiest method to use, okay? So I'm just going to place it like this. Whatever I have left, I will just use it as my length. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll mark it as so. Then I'm going to trace it out like this, and I will mark it out. So this is going to be my 270-degree flay. It is actually very simple, okay? If you check this out, this actually has a more fuller flay than the 180-degree flay, okay? So this is the reason, and this is the simplest method to achieving this. So the next one is going to be the 360-degree flay. Being that this is the full flay, we're not going to be dividing 6.28 by anything. So it's going to be my circumference divided by 6.28. Okay, so this is going to be my circumference divided by 6.28. So I'll keep using 10 inches as my circumference, all right? So 10 inches divided by 6.28, I have, that's 10 inches, which is my waist, divided by 6.28. So I got 1.5 inches, okay, 1.59 inches, all right? Holding my pattern paper like so, okay? I'll fold it like this. And at this point, please watch, this is quite different from the very first one, okay? So this is different from all of them. I'm going to fold it into 2 as so, all right? Then after that, I am going to fold it again into 2. So I'm going to do it again, in case for those that are beginners that do not know what flay is all about. So I kept my pattern paper like this, and after that I folded it first into 2, okay, and then I folded it again, okay. So basically this is what we have right here. So now after folding it here, the next thing I am going to do is to mark whatever I had, which was my 1.59. So I'm going to be using 1.6 inches, okay. So I'm going to just go ahead and mark it all around here, 1.6 inches. I'm just going to mark it right here, all around. And just like I did for all of them, whatever I had as my length remaining here, okay, this is actually the shortest part of my pattern. So whatever I have here, I'm going to be using it as my length. So I'll just mark here 5 inches, and I'll mark my 5 inches all round, okay? So I'll just go ahead and mark 5 inches all around here. So I'll just go ahead and I'll cut this out, okay? So this is my 360-degree flame. When you're drafting your own, make sure that you use the length that you want to use, okay? You're not going to be following me. What I'm doing is because I do not have enough pattern paper to use and demonstrate, okay? So this is basically going to be 360-degree plate. So I'm going to be cutting this out. The reason I'm cutting this out is because this is the only one that is not cut out, okay? From the beginning to the end, those were cut out. So this is how this is going to be. Now, if you notice, the flare here is actually more than that of the 270 degree and that of the 170 degree. So the more the circle, the fuller the flare. Okay, I don't know how to explain that. For 90-degree flare, you will notice that the flare is not plenty, it's like an A-cut flare. And then for 180-degree flare, it's going to be half of a circle. And for 270-degree flare, it's going to be 1/3 of a circle. So this is actually a full circle and it's actually very full. Okay. So now the next one I'm going to be showing you how to cut is the 720-degree flare. So 720-degree flare is 2 times this flare. So to arrive at my 720-degree flare, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place this again, okay? So basically, let's assume this is going to be my flare, okay? So after folding this into 2, I folded it again, okay? If you get what I'm doing. But since this is like 360-degree times 2, I am just going to place this right here and I am going to cut it out and get my 70-degree flare. So this is basically very simple. Okay, like I said earlier, I want to give us simple methods, okay?
Like I said earlier, a 720-degree flare
Is like a 360-degree flare times 2, okay? So I wouldn't use any formula for that. I would just put my 360-degree flare together and cut it open, and then whatever I have, I am going to join it together. So this is what I had right here. So I'll just join it together like so, and I am going to have an extreme full flare. So this is going to be my 720-degree flare. It is actually very simple, like so, okay? So this is how to cut out your flare in the simplest method possible. I know that a lot of people are always very confused about cutting out flares because of the calculation, okay? This is one of the parts that have calculations in sewing. So I just decided to put them all together in a very simple method where you're going to understand how to cut out a flare. So in case you want to cut out a flare, so this is actually the simplest method. Just tune out to this method and then we're going to have it right here. So it's actually very simple and it does not take anything or any time. Just cut it out whenever you want to and you have your flare. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.